Hey guys, hope you're all feeling great. On Telegram, there was a little bit of a debate going on between some popular content creators in the dissident right sphere. If you haven't heard about him, there's Joel Davis, who's a recently up and coming content creator on YouTube. He frequently appears on live streams with Keith Woods, and he has a fairly modest but growing presence on Telegram. So he made a post that I found kind of interesting, and there was a bit of a debate on the dissident rights sphere here on Telegram. So let's just look into it. So, what did he say? I've observed that a dichotomy has emerged in the minds of many between the so called liberal and illiberal positions on COVID, as though you need to affirm a liberal concept of bodily autonomy to avoid supporting vax mandates or something. This type of discourse is very concerning because it is indicative of the quintessential liberal ideological frame that there are only two real political choices: liberalism or arbitrary tyranny. Of course, it is possible to think outside this frame. In fact, we must simply think beyond it if we want to escape the conservative progressive false dialectic. I oppose both bodily autonomy and COVID vax mandates. I also oppose arbitrary tyranny, but I'm not a liberal. How is this possible? I oppose all these things on the same basis that civil society should aim towards making decisions upon how it operates with epistemic sincerity and genuine care of its members. How does this conflict with bodily autonomy? Well, a right to bodily autonomy would prevent society from trying to stop heroin addicts from shooting heroin, or gender dysphorics from disfiguring their genitals, or incestuous siblings from getting married. If you genuinely care about people in your society, we shouldn't want them or people around them doing crazy shit with destructive consequences. Does this mean I think the state should be able to do whatever it wants to its citizens, though? Obviously not. The state should only intervene when it has a good reason to do so. This is why I oppose the vax mandates, because there isn't a rational case for their imposition. The vaccines clearly aren't effective at preventing transmission. The disease itself is rather mild, and the vaccines have been causing some negative side effects. Additionally, the damage to unvaxxed people's lives being done by mandates clearly far outweighs the benefits of imposing them. This should be the argument against them: the lack of well reasoned justification for the policy, not more bodily autonomy. So, my take on this situation, I mean, he is right. You know, there is kind of a false dichotomy that, it's either bodily autonomy or it's complete tyranny. I do think that is something that conservatives and a lot of other people in the dissident right are pushing. Although I don't think that needs to be the case, I don't really mind if people are like, if bodily autonomy, if that means abortion, then, why don't I get to, decide what kind of vaccines I get and stuff like that. So I actually don't mind people doing that. Uh, because I'm not really sure that every instance of, some boomer saying, whoa, what about my bodily autonomy? I don't necessarily think every time he does that it's contributing to this false dichotomy. I think a lot of people just do it because they feel that it's wrong. They feel that injecting like foreign substances into your body that haven't been properly tested, they feel there's something wrong with that. It's like a it's like a reaction, that's kind of like based on the survival instinct. Like, I don't want anything bad happen to me. So I don't think that every time someone does this it's like contributing to a false dichotomy, but I understand what he's saying. It makes sense. So Keith Woods, he signal boosts this, and then also points out that, well, apparently in the late 2000s, the word bodily autonomy seems to have grown exponentially almost. So he says, completely agree with Joel re bodily autonomy. Keep in mind the concept of bodily autonomy didn't exist until the 1980s, when it was used by feminists to argue for abortion on the basis that babies feeding off their mothers is a violation of bodily autonomy. It has since been promoted primarily by globalist human rights NGOs. The idea you can't make a coherent case against unjust tyranny or bad government policy without recourse to a concept like this is laughable. You're not holding your enemies to a double standard. Their argument is still within a liberal moral framework as it rests on the dishonest claim that vaccines stop transmission, and so by their reasoning, not being vaccinated is a violation of other people's liberty. But moreover, once you start affirming their basic beliefs, they can equally hold you to a double standard if you're against abortion or for the national service. Yeah, so the point I think Keith is making here is important. If you operate within the liberal paradigm, I mean, the bodily autonomy argument, they can switch it and use it against you as well. Well, if bodily autonomy does matter to you, then what's your problem with abortion? Although I don't think that they would actually ask that, because abortion, it's kind of taken a backstage recently if you think about it. I think abortion rates are like the lowest they've ever been. Uh, I mean, I think there are statistics out there, and it's something I've heard a lot. So, although I would encourage you to look it up, but abortion, it seems to be kind of on the back burner nowadays. So, I'm not sure they would actually use that, but this is a good point. So, anyway, so Alex McNabb, he's, I guess, part of the TRS crew. He took issue with this and made a long post about it. Let's see what he says. I see lots of subtweeting over bodily autonomy, which in the context of vaccinations is really just an extension of medical ethics in regards to patient consent. It's kind of weird to see people trip over the stumbling block of abortion argument as if bodily autonomy somehow excuses the practice. It technically doesn't, because your autonomy is in tension with another person's continued existence. A fun way to own abortion activists on this was to tell them that they might have the right to evict a fetus, but they don't have the right to kill it. Guess none of you ever made that point. Given the advances in medical technology that takes late-term abortions completely off the table, and potentially middle trimester abortions too. This is why My Body, My Choice is actually a valid and hilarious objection to mandatory vaccinations. They might be dumb conservatives, but they aren't wrong. Your right to refuse medical interventions is in tension with the alleged health interests of others. Believe it or not, this has been a known conflict long before COVID. It would be helpful to make a distinction between patient consent and bodily autonomy if we're going to be this autistic about it. If you're using bodily autonomy as a broad category that contains people should be able to make informed decisions about their own healthcare and then roundly rejecting all of it, then I guess we're back to my point about rightoids being totally ignorant about medical practice. So if you don't know, uh, McNabb, he's been really going against quote unquote rightoids. I don't know. Maybe he's talking about us, people in his audience. Basically saying, yeah, we're kind of dumb. We don't know anything about medicine. I mean, I'll admit I'm not a medical expert or stuff, but he's been going at his audience recently because apparently there was something about seed oil, and then there's, different diet stuff that they were talking about, and he just got frustrated with the various, you know, armchair nutrition scientists and, people commenting when they don't have. I guess that's what he was upset about. Continued. We got to this point because doctors were afraid of getting retaliation for performing risky procedures, and patients got sick of waking up to find more organs gone than they had previously agreed to. From the looks of it, the idea of mandatory vaccinations is you get no right to refusal and no recourse if you're injured as a result. Yeah, that's actually just a monstrous idea across the board. I don't care what kind of nation runs with it. So his point, especially this one about, the difference between bodily autonomy in case of abortion and vaccines, this one is pretty important because uh, in the case of abortion, there's actually two entities whose bodily autonomy matters. Whereas in the case of vaccines, I mean, the vaccine isn't a living thing, it's not a person. So it's just your bodily autonomy that's in question there. So I guess this is a good point to bring up. My old take is if people are saying, my bodily autonomy, therefore don't want the vax, I'm I'm okay with that. I don't really think it's gonna contribute to some kind of false dichotomy. I mean, you can say, yeah, I believe bodily autonomy, but I don't necessarily think that, it's arbitrary tyranny at the same time. Yeah, so I'm kind of with this take here that doesn't necessarily, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing that conservatives are doing it. Maybe they have, maybe they don't understand what it's doing, but because it's part of the liberal paradigm, my body, my choice. That is technically a liberal, but I don't think that's I don't think that's a huge concession, to be honest. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Should we use my bodily autonomy as an argument against the vaccine, or should we you do something else? Use the data or something. I would like to know your thoughts about it. It's an interesting debate for sure.